It was the night of January 31st, 2019, in the quiet university town of Hull, England. Around 8:30 p.m., 21-year-old student Libby Squire left her dorm to meet friends. The plan was simple: a few drinks, some games, laughter, and later a night out at a popular local club. By 10 p.m., Libby texted her boyfriend Connor saying goodnight, and that she'd left her phone at home. It would be the last message she ever sent. At 11:20 p.m., CCTV footage captured the group arriving at the club. Everyone went in, except Libby. She was clearly intoxicated, barely able to stand, and the security staff refused to let her inside. Her friends decided to call a cab, gave the driver cash, and told him to take her straight home. They watched the taxi drive away, believing she'd be safe. Hours later, when the party ended, they texted her roommate. But Libby had never come home. Cold winds swept through the streets of Hull that night, and by dawn, a missing person investigation was already underway. When police began their search, one question haunted everyone. Had Libby chosen to disappear? Her friends and family said absolutely not. In the days before she vanished, she'd been happy, laughing, full of plans for the future. Libby loved her housemates, and she'd just received glowing marks for her winter coursework. She was a second-year philosophy student at the University of Hull. Bright, funny, endlessly curious. Friends described her as the kind of person who lit up every room she walked into. At home, she was deeply connected to her family, her parents, Lisa and Russell, her younger brother and two sisters. They were incredibly close. Lisa would later say that Libby was the soul of our family. But behind her confidence, there had been struggles. Libby had battled an eating disorder in her teens, and for a time, she hurt herself when life felt overwhelming. Still, she fought hard, pushed through, and found new strength in university life. After a short academic break, she spent time traveling in Paris, came back renewed, ready to move forward. She had a loving boyfriend, Connor, a circle of friends who adored her, and dreams of becoming a journalist after graduation. By all accounts, Libby Squire had every reason to live, to hope, and to believe in tomorrow, which made her disappearance all the more impossible to understand. Within hours, news of Libby's disappearance spread across Hull. Her name and face were everywhere, on posters, on social media, on local news bulletins. Police quickly tracked down the taxi driver who'd taken her home. He said he'd dropped Libby off on Wellesley Avenue, watched her walk toward her front door, but she never went inside. Investigators began piecing together the timeline using surveillance footage. The cameras showed Libby wandering the nearby streets around 11:37 p.m. Just minutes later, two passers-by found her lying in the snow. She was crying, disoriented, and refused their help. Another group of students saw her soon after, invited her to come in and warm up, but Libby kept walking. It was bitterly cold that night. Experts later said she might have already been suffering from the first signs of hypothermia: confusion, exhaustion, impaired judgment. Her friends contacted police when she failed to come home, and by morning, a major search operation was underway. Officers, students, and volunteers combed through parks, alleys, and backyards. Helicopters scanned the riverbanks. The city was blanketed with posters of her face. But there was still no trace of Libby. No phone, no witnesses, no signs of struggle. Just a trail that seemed to fade into the frozen night. Days passed with no breakthrough, and then a new lead changed everything. A man who lived near the local playing fields told police that, around 12:15 a.m., he was woken by the sound of a woman screaming. The cries were so loud that he checked his phone for the time. When he looked out the window, he saw a man hurrying back to a car. Investigators now had a crucial time frame, about 30 to 40 minutes between the moment Libby was last seen on the street and when the screams were heard. That window would soon reveal something disturbing. Reviewing the surveillance footage frame by frame, officers noticed a silver car circling the same neighborhood for hours that night. It kept driving up and down the quiet streets, as if looking for someone. Just before midnight, the car stopped at the end of the road near where Libby had been walking. The driver got out and followed her. At first, it seemed like she was standing near a bus stop, but she wasn't waiting for a bus. She was trying to find her way home. The man crossed the street again, this time walking in the same direction as her. Moments later, he spoke to Libby. For the next 5 minutes, they walked together, away from her house. The car waited nearby, engine running. At 12:08 a.m., Libby got into the car. It was the last time she was ever seen alive. Later, her broken wristwatch would be found in that same area. Investigators believed she might have been grabbed or forced inside. If the car had been parked just 1 meter further down the road, the security camera might have missed it entirely. But now police finally had something to follow: a car, a time, and a man who had vanished into the night. In the early hours of February 6th, police made an arrest. The man behind the wheel of that silver car was Pavel Relowich, a 24-year-old butcher, husband, and father of 2. On paper, Pavel looked like the perfect neighbor. He'd moved from Poland as a teenager, studied at a local culinary college, and lived just a short walk from where Libby was last seen. To everyone around him, he was polite, smiling, quiet, the kind of man who'd hold the door open for strangers. But investigators soon discovered another side of him, a side that had been hiding in plain sight. Relowich wasn't just a family man. For nearly 2 years, he'd been breaking into homes, spying on women through their windows, stealing their underwear, and exposing himself in the streets around Hull. He'd never been caught. Each time, he vanished before police could link the DNA or fingerprints left behind. But now, the match was there, and it connected him to multiple sexual offenses across the city. Neighbors were stunned. "He was just normal," one woman said. "We saw him jogging every night, smiling, always waving." What no one knew was that those late-night runs weren't for fitness. They were for hunting. A week had passed since Libby's disappearance. Police searched Relowich's home, but found nothing unusual. Then they opened his car. Inside was a disturbing collection: women's underwear, adult toys, used condoms, photos of women taken without their knowledge, and items stolen from nearby homes. Whatever image Pavel Relowich had built of himself, it was collapsing fast. But when detectives confronted him, he had a story ready. He claimed he'd seen Libby walking alone that night, cold, drunk, confused, and that he simply wanted to help. "I'm a good Samaritan," he told them. He said he offered her a ride home, dropped her off near the playing fields, and then went back home to watch porn on his phone. It wasn't a confession, but it placed him at the scene, and combined with the witness who'd heard the screams, detectives knew this was no longer a missing person case. It was something far darker. Soon after, police charged Relowich with 13 sexual offenses, but still couldn't yet prove what had happened to Libby. Then 7 weeks later, a fisherman made a gruesome discovery in the Humber estuary. 7 weeks after Libby vanished, a fisherman spotted something floating in the Humber estuary. It was a body, badly decomposed, barely recognizable. Around the neck hung a small necklace with a single silver letter, L. The medical examiner confirmed what everyone feared. It was Libby Squire. Tests revealed that she'd been sexually assaulted before her death, but the cause of death could not be determined. Her body had been in the water too long. The examiner said she might have been strangled or drowned. Police believed her body was dumped in a pond near the playing fields before drifting into the Humber River. For her mother, Lisa, the news was heartbreaking. Libby was terrified of water, she said. She could barely swim, and the thought that she might still have been alive when she was in that water, it's almost too painful to imagine. When the case turned from a disappearance to a murder, Lisa posted a message online. "My darling girl, thank you for choosing me as your mom. I tried to protect you as best I could. I'm so sorry I couldn't save you that night." By August 2019, 7 long months had passed since Libby disappeared. Pavel Relowich now stood trial, not for murder, but for a series of other crimes. At first, he denied everything, but at the last moment, he changed his plea, admitting to 9 separate offenses: 4 counts of voyeurism, 2 of outraging public decency, and 3 burglaries committed between 2017 and 2019. He was sentenced to 8 years in prison, later reduced to 6 after appeal. For investigators, that sentence wasn't justice, but it was time. Time to build their case without the risk of Relowich escaping. Detectives combed through thousands of hours of CCTV footage, tracing every movement he made that night. And one image in particular caught their attention. Around 2:30 a.m., the same silver car reappeared near the exact spot where Libby had vanished hours earlier. It stayed for just a few minutes, then drove away toward the city. Not long after, 2 women reported a man exposing himself on that same street. It was Relowich. He'd come back, not to help, but to cover his tracks. Months passed, and then he's the breakthrough investigators had been waiting for. Forensic results came back. Pavel Relowich's DNA was found on Libby's body, inside her body. When confronted with the results, Relowich changed his story again. He claimed that what happened between them was consensual, that Libby had made the first move. But detectives didn't believe him. They knew the truth. A drunk, freezing young woman had no strength left to consent or to defend herself. For investigators, the DNA was the final piece of the puzzle. They could finally prove that Libby Squire hadn't simply disappeared. She had been taken, and she had been killed. In October 2019, hundreds gathered for Libby's funeral. 2 weeks later, prosecutors made their move. After months of waiting, Pavel Relowich was formally charged with the rape and murder of Libby Squire. When prosecutors finally charged Pavel Relowich with the rape and murder of Libby Squire, officers read the indictment aloud, slowly, clearly. Through a translator, he heard the words rape and murder, and then he laughed. To those in the car, it was chilling, the sound of a man completely detached from what he'd done. His mother later told reporters, "I feel it in my heart. Pavel would never hurt that girl. He's a good man, a man who respects women." But even she admitted, if he truly did it, then he must face the punishment he deserves. For Lisa Squire, Libby's mother, that moment, seeing the man accused of destroying her daughter's life, was almost impossible to endure. But she stayed silent, composed, determined to see justice done. The trial would soon begin, and the world would finally hear what really happened on that cold winter night. January 2021. After years of waiting, the trial of Pavel Relowich finally began. Prosecutors described him as a man driven by obsession, a predator who saw women as objects and took pleasure in their fear. They told the jury that on the night of January 31st, 2019, Relowich spotted Libby alone, drunk and freezing, and in that moment, she became his target. He knew exactly what he was going to do, the prosecutor said. If it hadn't been Libby, it would have been someone else. Relowich claimed it was consensual, but the evidence, her injuries, the DNA, the timeline, told a different story. Cameras showed his car leaving the park at 12:20 a.m., just minutes after a witness heard desperate screams. The prosecution argued that within those 10 minutes, Libby was assaulted and killed. They didn't need to prove every detail. The science, the footage, the patterns of his past crimes, they all spoke for themselves. When watching women stopped being enough, the prosecutor said, he escalated. This time, he didn't just watch, he took. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. The world waited for their verdict. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury returned. Their verdict was clear: guilty. Pavel Relowich was convicted of the rape and murder of Libby Squire. The judge called it an unimaginable act of cruelty. He sentenced Relowich to life in prison with a minimum of 27 years before he can ever be considered for release. Libby Squire had no chance that night, the judge said. None at all. If Relowich is ever released, he will be watched for the rest of his life. But for Libby's family, the sentence brought no relief. After the verdict, Relowich's wife packed her things and returned to Poland with their children. She said she never truly knew the man she had married. He was kind, loving, devoted, she said. The truth broke me. It wasn't the man I thought I knew. For Lisa Squire, Libby's mother, grief became her mission. She began fighting to change the laws, to make sure so-called minor sexual crimes would never be ignored again. Together with police, she launched a campaign urging people to report every sexual offense, no matter how small. Because it always starts small, she said. And then one day, it doesn't stop. In 2022, Libby Squire made a decision few could understand. She asked to meet Pavel Relowich, the man who took her daughter's life. He agreed. She said she didn't want forgiveness, she wanted answers. "I don't hate him," Lisa said. "I don't even feel angry, I just need to know what happened. Those final 20 minutes of her life. Nothing he could tell me," she said, "would ever be worse than what I already imagine." But in February 2023, Relowich changed his mind. He refused to meet. He claimed the media had painted him unfairly, and that he no longer wanted to speak with Lisa. For her, it was another loss, not of her daughter, but of the truth. "Maybe that's how he keeps control," she said, by staying silent. Every morning, Libby Squire says, there's a moment between sleep and waking when life feels normal again. And then she remembers Libby's gone. "Sometimes the grief just hits me," she says. "I look at her photos, the ones I've seen 1,000 times, and I cry wondering how someone could take such a beautiful person from this world." But even in the silence that follows, Lisa refuses to let her daughter's story fade. She fights for change, for justice, for every woman whose voice was ignored. Because remembering Libby means refusing to forget what happened.